Hello, everyone. My name is Leilani Cawthon. I'm the CEO of the Learning Counsel, publisher, and also author of the book, The Consumerization of Learning, which has been surprisingly selling out every time we do a publishing round just recently. And also I'm an Edu Jedi Grandmaster. So if you haven't heard about the Edu Jedi, you need to be in that leadership society because that's where some really groovy stuff is going down, including the hybrid logistics project that is now underway. So today we're going to talk about the impact of the new models in K12 because normal sort of left the building. And so we have with us today Dr. Travis Taylor, who's the instructional technology specialist from Little Rock School District in Arkansas. Really glad to have you, Travis. You know, I think very highly of you. And Maurice Draggon. I always wonder if I should say Draggon or Dragon. Maurice. They're both cool. Senior Director of Digital Learning, Orange County Public Schools in Florida, also a good friend, super smart guy. And Dr. Drew Hinds, Executive Director of Technology Services from Huntington Beach City School District in California. Been a friend with him for a long time, and he recently went to that district, so he's going to tell us all about that. And Mary Schlegelmilch, who's the education advocate from Cisco. So we're going to have a robust conversation. We have a lot to cover today. I want to kick us off and sort of ground us by having Mary talk about what's going down now at Cisco, because there's been a lot of changes, but we're going to be going over the models, what's changed, and then also asking about, you know, sort of your teacher preparedness for a lot of this change from the districts. What are they seeing as signs of the shift? What's mutating? Like, are kids coming back? What's going on? And then also inspecting the backbone, right? Because the impact of the shift has been heavy on networks. And a lot of the districts that are going to be listening in today and also to the recording when we kick it out to all of our 215,000 readers, we generally get anywhere between 20 and 40,000 additional viewers. So we want them to be thinking about, you know, what they need to do to change, because the backbone of your network is sort of wrecking some of the equity of learning for kids at home. And remote. Maybe they can't see the teacher. Sometimes she walks off camera and all kinds of stuff is happening. So that's the detail of kind of what we're going to go into today. So Mary, I would like you to sort of kick us off here. Tell me when you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. And thank you for the invite, Leilani, and to the Learning Council. And you can go on to the next slide. This next is what really, we look at schools in many ways of what are the situations that our customers are trying to solve for? And they usually land within one of these four buckets, right? And so, especially with what has happened with the pandemic, how can we help our schools now build that flexible campus so that they can have students and workers on campus, off campus? How do we look at streamlining administration and helping our administrators really do their jobs effectively, whether it's using some AI, some learning analytics, maybe it's some IoT sensors, things like that that take some of the mundane tasks out? How can we use that backbone of the network to do that? And then my favorite, and this is my background, is that hybrid learning environment. How can we help really create a simple and secure learning environment for our students, first of all, but then also an environment that our teachers are comfortable in. And that's a piece that in my past life, before I came to Cisco, I was with a large school district. And even before that, then I was with very rural, where we were trying to always get our students connected and things like that. So that's my background. And then also the last bucket is underlining it all. We have to always be thinking about the safety and security, whether it's physical or cyber. These are very important to Cisco. And so as we go on to the next slide, I want to share with you that next piece of, these are some things that we really looked at. We wanted to make sure that we could offer a micro-credential as part of a professional development program for teachers that they could do in their own time, or through leadership, they can say, hey, this would be an extra thing that, you know, we will give you credit towards that professional development piece in the district. Here are 5 badges that teachers can get one or get them all. And of course, they are aligned with the ISTE standards. And we really want to kind of showcase that, because these are global badges that teachers can get. And, you know, as they start looking at a hybrid, a blended, a connected environment, what does that look like, and what are some of the skills that they need to have that type of environment? So looking on to that next slide that I brought up, I really think that this conversation, I was super excited when asked to be here, because models of learning is my background. And this is what I did in the district, is really help my teachers understand these types of models. And these are things that we all need to consider, is our calendar, our roster, and space and motion. And so we're going to dive a little bit more into those today, and we're super excited because this is what Cisco looks at as well when we help our school districts design their learning environments and what they want them to be. I'm just going to tease you a little bit with the next picture, because this one I love. This is at a college of education. And they're learning and sharing with teachers that are in the field, but also those that are learning before they go out to the field. How do you use a camera with an interactive display? How can you set up a room that, notice those tables and chairs, they're all mobile. They all are movable, but yet when you have a design that has those cameras in a spot, teachers do what they do best. They teach. And those cameras are finding the teachers wherever they're at in the room, and they're also finding students that are interacting and talking, because this is really about having a community of learning, whether you're all present in the classroom, or maybe some are remote, or maybe they're all remote. How can you use these types of environments? The next one is really kind of on the edge, this next picture. And this one I love because this is really allowing this environment to be very mobile, but yet with the use of color and with the use of the interactive boards that have cameras built into them, we can really have a seamless look. And it's kind of exciting. It makes you want to, hey, can I go teach in that room? And so I just wanted to put those couple teases out to you. And as we look at the next one, this is what Cisco does best, right? Is the tech stack. And this is what I'm always looking at, is what is needed in the classroom, maybe what is needed for a mentor, or maybe it's an advisor in the counseling department, what's needed at our districts. And that's when we have to look at the wide area network. We have to look at Wi-Fi, and can it reach all corners of the school that can be used by students and teachers alike. But also we're putting in safety and security of smart cameras. We're looking at synchronous and asynchronous applications on the network, and also what are those applications, making sure that they're secure, but what are they helping us make decisions about for the teaching and learning environment for both our staff and our students. And again, keeping those devices that they have in their hands very secure is what's utmost important. So again, as we head on to the next slide, we're really thinking about, define who you are, define your brand in your district, and let us be that partner with you, because it's really about digital access and engagement. And we're happy to be part of the conversation and help our customers with these. And so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Leilani. Thank you for allowing me to be on with you all today and being part of the great conversation.
Well, thanks. Thanks a lot, Mary. So some of those points we're going to bring up and go a little bit deeper in it as we get into the district conversation. But I want to remind everyone that the new special report from the Learning Council is out. It's called Learning Leadership versus Systemic Inequities. And it's basically looking at structure as a potential point of inequity. So we went a little bit deeper than even that level of conversation. What are the 8 models in current? And we said, okay, good. So if you're this digital traditional with an alternative schedule, which is like we're trying to do, maybe your school's trying to be the same as usual, a sort of a bureaucratic manufacturing line of grades and classes and a normal pattern of like all these kids need to be kept on pace in a certain way. So if you're that model, the one thing that really changed during the pandemic was you went to weird schedules. You did AB days, you did AB weeks, everybody's off Friday, and those kinds of things. So there's a certain set of questions here. It's coming out in this white paper that I'm showing on the screen fairly soon, but we're going to get into those a little bit today. The second model that I want to introduce is that blended flipped traditional. So you're traditional, but now you've had to reorganize all the teacher lesson plans because you're focusing on trying to achieve some personalization by virtue of homework is your reading time, your watching video time, and the other kind of time. And so you're getting your networks hit a lot heavier at night. So that's generally what you're doing when you're flipping learning. And the impact is heavy on teachers in terms of their lesson planning, particularly if they just went digital. Then there's this new model, and this is a model that has the keenest interest. Actually, I wrote down the statistics so far from our national survey, which was launched a little bit over a month ago. We have enough scientifically significant responses already. We don't think that there will be much of a change by the time we close the survey to tell us kind of what's going on with hybrid simultaneously. It's a huge model in play. In elementary, it's 23% of schools are having teachers dual teach via the screen with live kids in front of them. Middle schools, 26%, high schools, 24% so far. Digital traditional still at the biggest model. But in terms of interest, the highest model in interest is the hybrid logistics contemporary model, which is a complete shift in how you would actually administer space and time, how you would do your calendar as well as your roster. And it has a big impact on your networking collaborations. So this concept is a new one to most people in terms of model. And 25% of districts are indicating on the survey they're interested in this model. They want to stay there or they want to go to that model versus the 24% who are saying they want to remain in traditional. Everybody else, the other 50%, are somewhere in the blended, online contemporary, one of those other models in terms of their interest level. So this model would, basically change and Uberize learning pace so that students are basically in giant homerooms almost all the time, unless a class is triggered based on pace. That's a very different model than you've seen anywhere else. And that game board that you're seeing in the middle that looks like a twister board is just showing students moving along language, math, science, social studies, whatever subject they're in individually. And then when certain levels of cohorts preset by the teacher arrive at a point that requires togetherness, it triggers that togetherness, reserves the classroom, tells everybody that's going to come in via video the link to use, and everybody else physically goes over to that place. Meanwhile, teachers are paying attention to who's moving slower. This is the sort of personalization that the market is really expecting to happen with technology. But really, if we retain the traditional model, grade, class structure, we're still normalizing or trying to normalize everybody into the same pattern. Whereas some kids might say, they might be really fast in math. So the system should tell them to spend more time in their language where they're not doing as well and they're behind pace. We don't do that right now in most of the structure we're in. So this is a really robust conversation about how you really get to achievement based on structure and the technology that you're using to do it. So I don't want to get too, I don't want to talk about that endlessly. I want to go to my fabulous people that are on this webinar with us today and just sort of bring up, Travis, Maurice, Drew, and Mary to start us off with a conversation about sort of what is your model right now? What are you experimenting with? What's on the horizon? You just saw me sort of whip through the 4 core models. And I'm going to start with you, Travis, first. Kind of where are you guys at? What have you been thinking about? What kind of discussions have been going on? That kind of stuff in Little Rock.
What we've learned, particularly with being out with COVID, is that we did attempt the hybrid model of trying to do teach students who were off campus, who were virtual, but we had students also that were in the classroom, and we're trying to simultaneously have both groups. And so, because here's the thing, I think the caveat we have to understand: in Arkansas, we came back to school, and so we came in with the notion of trying to bring both of these groups together, and to have the virtual students at home, have the students in face to face, and do that together, but after, we looked at the information and the data and talking with the teachers, we decided to go forward in the fall of actually just having a separate academy for those students who will be doing virtual and for those students who will be in face-to-face. In other words, we separated the teachers, have a separate principal, have a separate structure for them to maintain that. Now, this is something that's kind of going on across the state. Virtual academies now have begun to form, and we have communities who are buying in and wanting to go there. But something that I've noticed, particularly this week, it seems as though leadership, and I'm saying this from a statewide perspective, is they're kind of backing off now. At first, they were really for the virtual, but because the mass mandates and things are coming down, and we're getting all the good numbers, they've kind of turned their attention to, well, let's just go ahead and just stay with this traditional model of just getting everybody back in school. And we're not really gonna, go too much into the virtual thing, which again, I've always advocated, I say, 2019 is over, and that we still should look forward and prepare to meet these new models, because I think what we're saying, interestingly enough, is that we're not really doing personalization because it's the same model, which it's a constrained version. It's like constrained choices. I'm gonna give you a choice, but you got these two choices to choose from. And so
it's a good way of putting it.
And so exactly, that's what we're seeing now. So we are doing the virtual academy. We will still offer the ability for students to operate asynchronously and synchronously, but in a virtual setting.
I'm really interested in watching what happens with you guys, because I think the attrition to alternatives, if they try to stick only to the old model, is going to be heavy. Yeah, so I'll be interested in see what's happening with you guys. Okay, so let's, as I'm showing the screen, I'm just going to go to Maurice next. I feel like, Drew, you're just, you're antsy to answer, but let's hold on just one second. Maurice, what's happening with OCPS?
So I think just as everyone else, a lot of what we're doing, top level is driven by what your state has decided. When we started the school year, the governor of our state said that all students needed to be back in school if they wanted to be. So that ended up meaning that we had to have all of our schools open in some capacity. We had about 35 to 40% of our kids that were back, probably closer to 35, and about 65% of them were virtual. Then when we went to, as things have just progressed, we're now at the point where those numbers have completely flipped. We're about 65 to 70% of our kids are back, and about 35% of them are still virtual. And we know, based upon what the governor has said here in the state of Florida, that he wants the virtual option. They haven't really said they're going to not have it, but I think most districts are pretty much thinking they're not going to have that ability to have the innovative option that we had this past year. With that being said, we still have our virtual school model, and we still have our face-to-face model. Some of the things we're looking at, especially in our face-to-face models, and especially in the secondary area, are what are some ways that we can use some of the things that we've learned to kind of increase some of the opportunities for kids, especially in high school, to give them maybe a schedule that is a little bit closer to what they would have in college, where there are a couple select classes that we can make virtual so that they can have some flexibility in their schedule. And we're also looking, especially in the area of the arts. One of the things that we were able to do during the pandemic during the height of the pandemic, I should say, that I think was really, that we really learned a lot from, is that we had the opportunity in the area of the arts to bring in a lot of professionals into the classroom virtually. So we had folks who were professional ballet dancers and folks who were professionals in other areas of art and dance actually do virtual lessons for our students. And so we're trying to think of different ways that we can almost build this arts focused area that will allow us to enable the virtual connections that we've made through the height of the pandemic, to then further that into art instruction moving forward.
Yeah, that's a really exciting development, because that's what we think is coming for education. It's sort of a gig economy view of, source from anywhere. That is really interesting. You guys should keep a little diary of that, because that's going to be a story, a big story. Yeah, I'm excited that you did that, because as a kid, I would have loved it. That would have been super awesome. I always wanted to be a ballerina. Okay, so Drew, what's happening with you? Now you're in a new district, but can you say where you were before too?
Sure. Silver Falls, Oregon, just outside of the capital of Salem, was where I was at the last 5 years. And we were really equipped well when the pandemic hit because we had the learning management systems in place. Some of the student information systems were working pretty smoothly. The teachers were, to a certain extent, trained in some of the tools, document management and others. I think we were at a pretty good place. There was some work we needed to do right away to just attempt at trying to supplement teachers' content so that students had something to consider while the teachers were preparing, right? And while they were delivering. And so that complemented what the teachers were doing in their synchronous sessions. And so the asynchronous piece was what we really needed to supplement. And we weren't prepared for that, obviously. But that was a really good opportunity for us to kind of make that transition quickly. And then during the pandemic or during that transition, it's a great chance for me to look south, and having spent a year of my early career in California, brought my family down to Huntington Beach City School District. 5,000 students, 6 elementaries, 2 middles. And this particular school district is just undergone a modernization process where the classrooms just look like the Jetsons, and the interactive flat panels in the classroom and interactive tablets in the hands of kids. Just a really neat environment to be able to just come in and see where we go from here in the next decade or so. So that's kind of where I'm at personally. But with regard to the models, I really appreciated about what Maurice shared about the high school offering. My daughter goes to high school here local, and the teachers there took the opportunity to teach both face-to-face and online at the same time. They were teaching us, in essence, the 10 or 12 students, which my daughter was a part of, and the students face-to-face that were coming in that AB model. So they were forced into the kind of that hybrid flex, and there was opportunities for college credit classes and dual credit classes. And with the summer, everyone seems to be offering the learning loss opportunities, right, which include acceleration during the summer. So to get a kid ahead to take a college class during the summer that counts for both a high school class and a college class, that's a nice way to do this. Community colleges are happy to have them. High schools are happy to have them get acceleration, and it's a great opportunity to kind of Uberize. I love the way you put that. So because we're essentially outsourcing some of that acceleration to the community colleges, which are well suited to do some of that work. I don't know if it's perfect, but because of the maybe groups that the community colleges have been able to focus on and not focus on in the past, whereas K12 has to focus on. That's an interesting conversation in itself. So I think with regard to the models, I love the idea of the hybrid, simultaneous, traditional, or we call it kind of high flex model. And I think within Huntington Beach City, we're able to take the modernization and then some of the experimentation that's gone on in our middle schools and look at schedule. And I love the core pieces of space, time, and network, because anytime any assistant principal would tell you the values drive the calendar and the students' interests drive the schedule. So where the families are focused and where the students' interest lies can drive what those time expenditures are. If that's a finite resource, we can move a little bit more nimbly within our environment. So it's an interesting time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think I should share for a second what you mentioned, the hybrid high flex model, because I didn't share that already. This model, I think, is the one that people will mutate to first, most districts. And then, Mary, I'm going to ask you to make a comment. But hybrid high flex means maybe you are sticking with digital traditional, and you've also got some cameras in some classrooms, where people are simultaneously teaching, but then you've opened up maybe 1 hour or multiple hours a day, or maybe one full day a week. That is the other logistics model. Everybody's on individual pace in certain things. Maybe you're extracurricular. Maybe those hours are used so that teachers can catch kids up who were behind. It's all your remediation or intervention time. But it's definitely a bigger alteration in the master calendar. But basically during those couple of hours, the kids on campus are in giant, Harry Potter houses. They're big commons rooms, quad areas or whatever, giant library conversions. And then that learning is being Uberized with live teaching intersection. So what I step back away from, and basically what I heard from all three of you, Travis, Drew, and Maurice, is that you're in a mutation pattern. Things are being experienced that weren't being experienced before. And if I look at this across the country from everybody that we've talked to, it's definitely, we're in a mutation pattern, but very few know where it's going or really have in their mind an ideal scene of how they could be or should be. So I just want to come to you, Mary, and say, are you seeing the same sort of things that I'm seeing? Because I know you guys are outfitting tons of schools with these tracking cameras so that the virtual experience is almost 3D, in comparison to what it would be before. So the need to run both rails, like we're going to have the online school over here, and then we're going to have I don't know if that's necessary anymore. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of this hybrid, high flex type of classrooms being installed or being at least thought of that will have at least one class per grade, that teacher may have students in person in their classroom as well as students that are remote. And then they're going to be looking at, well, how do we compensate that teacher? Because it is a little bit more to think about when students are remote. But I will tell you, the biggest piece that I say to every administrator I work with is when you put in these systems and these cameras that will track the active speaker and have simplify the microphones and simplify the auditory, all of that stuff, you have to make it simple. And that's an important piece. But we are seeing that some schools say, hey, if you're going to do that hybrid high flex as a teacher, maybe you're having a smaller number of students that you have total because it is extra. But the biggest piece that we're always saying is, let's make it easy on them. I was working with one school district and they said, you know what, we're buying these cameras. They have to plug into the teacher's laptop, but we want the teacher to be able to move the camera based on when they're teaching in a certain area. And I'm thinking, so now a teacher has to go back and rethink that? I mean, we really want to make it so that teachers do what teachers do best, right? Move about the room, create a classroom community, and teach. And just really interact with their students wherever they may be. But again, I'm going to go back to that word, classroom community. Whether the students are present with the teacher in the classroom and or there's some remote, are they all part of the community? And I think that's something that we're thinking about differently, even when it comes to the rules 5 years ago. Some schools said, yeah, we can't have cameras pointing at kids because of privacy. Well, now we're starting to rethink, hey, this is about teaching and learning, and this is about a classroom community. And, now we just sign off with, the parents that say, I want my student to be in this room. And yes, we understand that there will be cameras that will be on. So we're really changing our thinking, and we're moving into these models that are stretching of our thinking of, well, what was normal and what's new, right?
Yeah, this is a really interesting time. And I think, I would encourage more leaders to sort of step back and go, what are we mutating to? Yeah. What makes sense? Like, the article in this particular piece, and I'm going to scroll up to a definition because I see your questions coming in. I should unmute you, but the question of what is hybrid logistics and what is Uberization is in this special report. I'm going to go to the definition here so everybody can see it. A lot of research work that went into this special report. So hybrid logistics is a reimagination of the old grade and class structure in favor of a course structure, even for the little kids. So pace and not necessarily competency, because there's a lot of people that are afraid of pace or competency only. So basically step by steps, which means every lesson would have to be organized. And then actually tag the points in a lesson that actually require teaching, as in, I'm going to lecture, or I'm going to now lead an activity. That's not being done right now. In the traditional structure, it's like the teacher's in the classroom all day, every day. And there's a lot of time going on in the classroom where it's almost like the teacher's not even there because kids are doing their own thing, right? So that's not very efficient for teaching. So there's points that are being made about what is the Uberization, and definition of basically Uberization of teaching is the use of teachers for transactional teaching, okay? Because when you rent an Uber, basically, they're doing a transaction with you. They give you the ride, you pay, blah, blah, blah. The transaction of teaching is not elevated to the degree that it could be. And therefore, the kids that need the most help are not getting it, because there's a systemic inequity in that it has to be whole group remain on pace. It's a normalizing structure. If you're trying to make everybody be the same, as we've been doing for the last 200 years, there's a problem in that, and it's become very evident there's a problem in that. Drew, you had your hand raised. Go ahead.
Implies you have a driver, right? And whether the driver be, maybe it's in a Tesla. I don't know if we want to go too far on that, but in this context, you have somebody that's helping bridge and translate for that kiddo. And I mean, at its core, teaching and mentoring, I'll just use that term as well, with regard to maybe social emotional learning, is a focus. Both the content and maybe the skills, or the tacit and the explicit knowledge, both of those things are valuable to a kid, and they both need a bridge of a human. It's a human interaction that's teaching. And at our core, we can use tools to supplement that or to reinforce that, Khan Academy or other video-based tools where a kid can pause, replay, take an assessment, go into a different learning pathway. Those are all really good tools to supplement, but at its core, teaching is a human interaction. And teachers in a classroom that has multiple displays and then 25 to 36 kids, it's a lot we're asking of our teachers. And it's a lot in this last year we've asked our teachers. So many teachers and principals right now are overwhelmed. There's been a lot of change that's happened, and they feel like so many different things are changing, like what is going to stick. And so I'd just like to take a second to say the way we took these 8 models, Leilani, is we kind of went through with a small group of folks and asked, what is it that we're keeping from what we've tried out this last year? Mm-hmm. And if you can identify those couple of things that you're going to keep from that worked, we knew it worked, we watched it work, the family support team, the interventions, the students participating in video conference and parents participating in video conference for their IEP, their individual education plan for special ed. We had a great turnout for IEPs this last year because we catered to the families' time schedules. What worked within the instruction in terms of reinforcement, what content tools, what skill building tools were useful. And so if those things that we had utility this year that we keep, I think a great exercise is to go through these 8 models and identify the things you did try out and then the things that you want to keep. And at least in Huntington Beach City, we've identified personalized learning as kind of something we can define and put into our strategic planning. And it's squishy enough still that you could talk about customization, you could talk about competency based, but personalized is still human, and we're K8, so we got to stay a little bit squishy here. But I think that is identified for us how we want to kind of take and leave things on the table in the future. But I'm really interested to hear what Travis and Maurice have to say about what's happening on the other side of the continent.
Yeah, perfect segue. We were going to go talk now about what the teachers are prepared enough to do and kind of what they've been going through. And so let's go next to Travis, and then Maurice, I'm coming to you on that topic. Yeah.
I think we really try to put a lot in place to support them, to help them make that transition. A lot of everything that we've done on our end in instructional technology was really about having to support them and to help them across the transition. Going forward, we're really trying to make sure that as we go into the new year, and it looks like, there's that normalcy coming back, that we maintain that ability for them to become comfortable and begin to stretch out to do more of the teaching online and to expand what they've learned and because a lot of them started to get comfortable with it. They started getting success and started feeling okay with it. And we want to try to maintain that and not allow those skills to dampen. We have LMS that we brought in. So we brought in the LMS in the middle of all of this, but it was kind of a thing that we kind of had to do. And so that was an extra challenge. But I think the LMS allowed us to have that flexibility and gives us those tools, and they began to connect to what they were already doing, whether it was Google Classroom and how they were developing their classes, how they were developing their lessons. Now, I have to mention as well, internally that we're really focusing on the things like the highly reliable schools with PLC process. So all of that is in play as well. And so what we're trying to do in instructional technology is to try to make sure that those items that they're talking about in those sessions have some type of technology base that they can relate to, so they can see it, how this fits in technology. Because too often we always see technology as just something that happens over here on the side, and it does not really, they can't really make meaning from it in a sense. And so we're trying to make sure that what the teachers have gained and those successes that they've gained during this process, that they continue.
Yeah, stabilize it. Yeah, batten down the hatches on the goodness. I love that. Okay, so Maurice.
I think just to piggyback on what's been said so far with what we've seen in OCPS, we in some ways were very lucky. We were in year 6.5 of an 8-year rollout of technology to our schools, with going into the last 2 years of elementary. So we had middle and high school. They already had devices. They already had one-to-one. We've had a LMS when the pandemic hit for 4 years already. And so we already had a lot of the fundamentals in place. We just needed to accelerate that usage. One of the statistics from our usage at this point that stands out to me is pre-pandemic, we were averaging in our LMS about 350, pre-pandemic, we were averaging about 100,000 assignments being turned in per day inside of the LMS. When the pandemic hit in that April timeframe, we jumped from 100,000 to 350,000 assignments inside of our LMS. By the time we came back to school, we were at, I think in September, October, we hit 800,000 assignments per day being turned in inside of our learning management system. And then we're in that 550 to 600,000 range per day. I mentioned that we had that shift from 65% virtual and 35% face-to-face to now where we have 65% face-to-face and 35% virtual. What's really been fascinating to me, however, is that our usage of all of our systems has not changed. Those numbers did not flip and now drop down precipitously. And so what that's shown us is that there are some things that teachers are really hooked onto, video and the ability to upload their own video to use as part of their instruction. We've seen like an explosive use of that. We have Canvas as our LMS, and Canvas Studio is what we use to serve video inside of it. And the use of Canvas Studio has taken off and just stayed high. And there are other components that we're seeing that teachers are just hooked onto. Drew, I'm going to steal from you that idea of doing some really, short, small scale surveys of folks and asking them what went well this year and what didn't, to make sure that we're keeping that pulse. Because what we're seeing for sure with teachers is, one, for sure, a lot of them are stressed, a lot of them are burnt out. But there are a lot of them that are honestly saying, I got to try a lot of things this year, and there are definitely some things I'm going to keep. And we want to make sure that the things that they're saying they're going to keep, we're supporting them appropriately.
Yeah, I love this. I love everything you just said. And what I would ask is that if they're starting to use more recorded video, like assign a video of me already lecturing a year ago on the same thing, right? That could open up way more time for individual personalization, because they're not having to re-lecture. This is something I brought up with the higher ed world, 15 years ago. I asked somebody that was doing some video stuff, and I said, like, aren't the professors afraid that they're going to be marginalized because they're fully recorded now for everything? No. So it's a very interesting, that particular point right there, Maurice, is a very interesting mutation point because it can change the behavior in the classroom, like what a teacher is actually doing. In fact, and I want to have Mary comment on this particular part before I go on to the next question for you guys, is that, that the lecture style of everything is not really personalized. And when you move to being able to just sort of zero in on kids, it changes the environment. And the environment now from the tech side, from Mary's side, is moving so that you can be anywhere at any time and join a gathering of being humanness. And it's not necessarily a teacher lecturing. When you join the classroom, everybody's just working. But you can tag somebody or you can raise your hand at any time. And so it's not like theater. It's just, I have the cameras all on at the same time in case anybody pipes up at any time, but I'm not trying to produce a theatrical moment. I'm just providing a tether for you that, you're out there and you're just tethered in and it's a normal class. And I think that that's a really interesting development because most of the pandemic, most teachers were trying to be actresses and actors on screen. And that really was not working for a lot of kids. So Mary, what are your thoughts on that particular part? Because I love what Maurice just said.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that, I'm going to go back to some of the things that I really believe at the core when I was in their type of role that these three gentlemen were in with the school district. And it's about, do we have a library of asynchronous video that all of our teachers are contributing to? Because we have some teachers that are great for certain learning styles, and they really have a way of connecting with some students, and we know that. And so now when we have those students in our class, can we say, oh, here is another way to divide polynomials that's in our library that you now can have at your disposal as well and consume it on the time you need it. But also that ability that when we're in a synchronous session, can we then enable a breakout room and say, yeah, let's personalize it for Tom, Mary, and Susan, and let's go into this breakout space and I'll help you, and just really personalize that learning piece, but also developing the peer-to-peer mentoring and personalizing that learning. I mean, so now students can start thinking about, I really learn well when I'm with a particular student, or we can develop really nice cohorts. And I think that as we look at the learning models, that we can say which ones would really do well with cohorts of kids and let them really move, and which ones do we need to personalize and bring in-house with us because of their learning style or their even learning disabilities. We may say, hey, we really need to, for certain lessons, pull them together and then push them back with the other students. And so we now have those capabilities. And I think that's what's super exciting about this is, the last time education models really changed was over 100 years ago. So let's take this as an opportunity, and that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it sort of come full circle. Like this Uberized model, the hybrid logistics contemporary model is the one-room schoolhouse on steroids, right? With algorithms and logistics everywhere. Yeah, thank you for that comment. Okay, so I want to get on with the next thing, but I do have some comments. We're going to come back around to you, Lauren, and maybe have you unmute, and also Leslie and Anita, because we want everybody to feel really super involved in all this. But I'm going to move to my next set of questions, which is, there's signs everywhere that the mutation is really real. We've already sort of gone through some of them. I want to come back around to each one of you and go, what else are you seeing? Like, there's been some waves of money coming in, and what are you seeing as part of the dialogue of how do we change? Maurice, I want you to go first this time.
And again, I think it's just interesting in the conversation because of just where different districts are. when we look at some of the funds that are coming in, we've had several discussions as a district around the funds that are being made available by the government. One of the things we're thinking about is the sustainability of some of the things that we've already put in place, and do we use some of these funds to kind of help with that sustainability of if we need to refresh certain things, do we do that or do we not? We're trying to be careful with it because one of the things that our superintendent has always kind of said, and I think it is important to say, is that you don't take like non-renewable funds and take those funds to then build something that you want to be renewable, because you're taking money that you know is going to run out and then trying to build something long term. So we're trying to be strategic about that as a district, and you know, leadership is doing a great job considering that. I think even with that being said, we are looking and trying to see in being strategic if there are certain places that we can maybe just do like a refresh of devices or do a refresh of classroom equipment, or use it to kind of target maybe buying specialized equipment that would allow more video or things like that inside the classroom, as we look at some of these other initiatives that we've talked about. So, you know, those are the kind of ways that we're looking at the additional funding, that it definitely is, I think, is going to be helpful, but we're not going to just go out and just spend because we can spend. We want to make sure that we can keep up with whatever we spend on.
Yeah, it's understandable. I will tell you, though, as a researcher, one of the things I believe is that there's not going to be a funding cliff because the big pension pots were paid off. And so the debt level of the states and the local governments, which are, you know, 85% of the funding for schools, they're not going to come back at you after this with less money. It's going to be more. On the routine funding, just so you know. That's from a financial perspective, that's what I've been reading about. Okay, so let's go. Travis, you next.
Well, I kind of have to piggyback on what Maurice was saying, is that the biggest conversation that we've been having is sustainability. So we have list of applications and programs and things that in curriculum instruction that we were trying to use or continue using. And the main question has been, okay, sustainability, when this money runs out, what are we going to do? We are going to look at refreshing things like our whiteboards, because the last time that we actually put those in at the original stimulus funds from 2008. So, you know, we're looking 10 years out from there, is putting those devices, refreshing that device for another 10-year run, basically, of not in just the hardware of it, but because of the brand that we've chosen. We're looking at sustainability of how we're going to sustain the professional development of, let's say, we're using SMART, so we're using the software and what we're able to do. One thing else we've been looking at is integration. Conversation that I'm always having is about interoperability and integration of, you know, whenever we're picking something or we're looking at something, you know, how does this relate to rostering, and how does this relate to moving data from assessments and from different applications that we're using? Because those are the conversations. I think it's not just about buying the things, but even the sustainability. How can we move forward with how we're using data, manipulating data, and just really accessing data? So looking at what we can bring into our rosters, how we can take that information and get it to the state. Those are other conversations I think that we're also really looking at with our funds, along with the sustainability. But if the question is like the next level of, you know, what do you do now with this application? Not just get it and not just sustain it, but what can it do? What can it, going forward, what can we produce? What can we monitor formatively with it? And so we've been really trying to also look at data.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Like, you know, the stimulus funds are not just to, you know, support renewal of the SAMO. We should be buying longevity. We should be buying mutation that means we're more sustainable long term. And like this special report, we get rid of the systemic inequities. what, you know, we do things differently. That's really, I think, some of the point of all of this. So I'm glad that you said that, Travis. That was awesome. Okay, Drew.
100% agree with what's been said so far. And I think some of it comes back to the existing pipes that the feds are using and the states are using to deliver these funds. It requires them not to be used for what's called supplanting, where you're trying to, put money into things that are supposed to be an existing service that you get state funding from already. Mm-hmm. And so to some extent, only what you've said is actually happening because we have to. We can't use those monies for some things that are existing services. So it'll reinforce our behaviors as state and local leaders as those monies come through to use it on things that are outside of the parameter of what's already being used. I think it's easy to separate into buckets of the what and the how. I think I'm trying to build on what Maurice had talked about and take it kind of one more step. And that's the what's are the stuff, and it includes both the hardware, and whiteboards are a great investment. Travis, I think interactive flat boards, I'm focused on reliable internet dependable devices and interactive displays. That's kind of our core focus right now. And it took about 6 months to build up that and listen to stakeholders, but those are our three focuses. And it lines up with our 21st century learning and personalized learning approaches that's in our school improvement planning. It's called an LCAP in the state of Oregon or state of California. And so in this context, the what's are the softwares, the hardwares, and the hows are the strategies. So what are we going to keep from the what's and what are we going to keep from the hows is the way I approach this. Is like, as we looked at these models, we're going to keep the learning management system that was kind of put in place. Some of the content management systems, some of the tools, the video tools, love Canvas Studio, but there's all kind of Screencastify, the other tools that the teachers are using the heck out of. So that needs to come back to data. I love that Maurice was pulling the numbers on the assignments in Canvas. Well done, dude. The usability data, the usage data in Clever and ClassLink and other APIs also is super useful. And so I did a little stack ranking of the tools that we had used most. And the ones that I had hoped to make the top weren't necessarily at the top of the usage, right? And that's kind of unfortunate. But some of them are state adopted materials that maybe need to be more reinforced in training, right? So I don't know. It's interesting to look at the data and then contrast that with what actually happened. And I'm sure researchers are going to have a ball with that in the next 5 years. But So I think the what and the how, and then the last thing I wanted to touch on, and I think this comes back to Mary and Cisco's role in this too, is think about the 7-layer OSI model, right? And those of you that are not super technical, the OSI model talks to the layers of your network infrastructure that support what you do in the internet connection, right? Yeah. But take that one step further and think about how the educational layers have been established over this last year and how we can further delineate the layers in education around the content management system, the learning management system, the interactive library information system, all these different systems and those layers. They're not really well defined yet, but as we kind of redefine and define those things, we're going to have more success with what Travis was talking about in terms of interoperability. It starts with universal design, but it's got to work with rostering. It has to be delivered in single-click, single sign-on environments, super secure and super easy for teachers because they don't even want to log in 7 times during the day. They just want to log in once for the entire day, and they're out of their classroom, they're away from their device. All kinds of security problems in those kinds of environments that we deal with every day.
Right. Well, now you just gave Mary a bunch of work. Now she has to crosswalk the impact of curriculum on the network. Mary, let's get busy. So Mary, your comment, and then I'm going to unmute a bunch of these people that are making comments and have them say their point, and then we'll have some answer back, and then we'll be releasing people back into the wild. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I think we've hit on a couple of things that are just near and dear to what I'm always saying as well. And in my job, I look at myself as a translator sometimes between the Cisco company that's building these technologies and our customers, because I used to be one of those customers. So I'm trying to be the translator between the two. And I think that as we keep teaching and learning as the core, what is that premise? And what I'm always saying is it secure and is it simple? And then, does it make those connections between IoT, between the APIs, through the LTIs? These are what's super important as we start looking at standards-based, maybe one rostering and things like that. Where are those groups that we need to always be with so that we are going with our customers to make sure that all of the applications, because we don't want to create all the applications. We don't want to create all the technologies. We want to be sometimes just the glue that makes it ride on the network very efficiently. And to have that network give our customers, you all, the information you need to make better decisions for the teaching and learning environments in the end.
Perfectly said. Okay, so I have unmuted Lauren. If you can unmute, I think you had a comment or question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I am a speech pathologist and I have been working virtually, and I have found that collecting data and doing trials through this mode, and I'm still working 100% virtually, is very efficient. We don't have to deal with transportation time between the students, their classrooms. We're getting a full 30 minutes, which is IEP driven, as you know, an individualized educational program. We're getting full 30 minutes. I can pop the kids in from the waiting room with literally a 3-second difference between. We get a full 30 minutes. It has made teaching articulation very positive because I can get right up against the camera, as well as having the students do the same. Whereas even before the pandemic, we hesitate getting really, really close to the kids because of the amount of transmittable flus and colds and things like that. And also too, when you're not clinical and you're in a public school setting, becoming that close and touching a child is always an issue. So this mode, I wish that they would open up an opportunity for a therapist, a social studies teacher, science teacher, math teacher within the middle school, within the elementary schools, for us to see all the children in the district who want to remain virtual. And I would jump at that chance because I have seen my clinical side significantly increase with the increased use of technology.
What I would just add to what Lauren was sharing very quickly is that I think that is in line with a lot of what we were thinking about when we were thinking about like what's going on in the arts and what's going on in some of these other areas where there's a lot of opportunity, and especially in areas where you have folks who have specialties, that you need that specialty to really be spread out across either your campus, maybe it's like a reading coach or a math coach or something else like that, or folks who may teach certain subject areas that you don't have a lot of folks who teach it, like maybe French or foreign language, and really seeing is there a way to scale up their ability to impact students. And I think we have some of the infrastructure in place now that is really going to allow us to get the data around that, and then say separate of anything with the pandemic or anything else like that, we're actually seeing some really good numbers and some good efficiencies in getting more student contact time through doing things this way.
Thank you. Okay, Anita or Jennifer, if you want to make a quick question or make a comment. I was looking for Leslie also, but I couldn't find her in the list any longer. Anita or Jennifer, going once, going twice. All right, well, it looks like we're almost at the top of the hour. This has been so much fun. And I just want to thank everybody for, being with us today. I'm going to sort of wrap up now. Travis, awesome. Proud of your work. And I really want to hear more about what happens as things go forward. I know you guys are in your mutation moment. And Maurice, can't wait to see you when I come down there this fall. I'm like super excited. And Drew, good job. You landed there and now you're just ripping it up. It's awesome. And Mary, thank you so much for your awesome comments. So just to finish us off, we have coming up on May 27th, a webinar on data and deputization of parents, big topic, totally hot. And then get out of your seat simultaneously teaching. There's some tips and tricks, about how you can do that. So you're not like tethered to your chair all day long as a teacher. And as an administrator, you're actually paying attention to this. And then we'll be doing our summer Edu Jedi camp, and that information will be coming soon. So thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Travis. Maurice, thank you so much for being with us. And I will release you back to the wild. Until next time, this has been your host, Leilani Cawthon, from the Learning Council and the Edu Jedi Leadership Society. See you next time. Bye.